Okay, let's dive in. Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take source material, whatever it might be, and really pull out the key insights for you.
Exactly. And today we're looking at something, well, maybe a bit unexpected.
Yeah, it seems kind of niche, but the numbers tell a different story. We're digging into the global market for ice axes.
Our source here is a forecast report from Cognitive Market Research. It gives us this really detailed view covering 2021 right through to 2033.
Right, so our mission today, unpack these numbers, figure out where this market is actually heading, who the big players are, and, what this all means for a very specific bit of gear.
Let's jump into it. So the report starts with the big global overview.
Okay.
Back in 2021, the worldwide market value for ice axes was pegged at $302.611 million.
Oh, okay, 300 million. That's already quite a bit bigger than I might have guessed just off the top of my head.
It is, yeah. You think mountaineering, maybe ice climbing.
Yeah.
But it adds up globally.
So where is it going? The report forecasts growth, right?
Definitely. They project it reaching $380.6 million by 2025.
Okay, decent jump in just a few years.
And then looking further out, the 2033 projection is $602.055 million.
Whoa. So basically almost doubling the 2021 number in what, 12 years?
Pretty much. That points to some real momentum.
Yeah, definitely suggests something's driving demand. Is there a growth rate figure?
There is. The report calculates the compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, at 5.9% over that period through 2033.
Okay, 5.9%. So not explosive maybe, but really solid, steady global growth for this kind of equipment.
Exactly. It's an expanding market.
All right, that global number is helpful, but, the story's always in the regions, isn't it? Where does the report break it down?
It does. And yeah, this is where you see the interesting variations. The report puts North America as the largest region overall.
The biggest market currently.
Yes. For 2021, the revenue there was $121.65 million.
Okay, so a pretty big slice of that $302 million total.
Around 40%. And it's projected to keep climbing, reaching $199.882 million by 2033.
So strong growth there, too. Does it break it down by country within North America?
It does. And maybe unsurprisingly, the United States is really the powerhouse in the region.
Makes sense. What are the numbers?
The U.S. market alone was $85.398 million back in 2021. That's projected to hit $138.519 million by 2033.
Okay, so the vast majority of the North American market is the U.S.
Yeah. Canada's significant, too, around $24.5 million in 2021, growing to nearly $42 million. And Mexico showing growth as well, from about $11.6 million to $19.5 million.
Right. But the U.S. is clearly the dominant player there.
No question.
Okay, interesting. Let's hop across the pond. What about Europe? How does it compare?
Europe's the second largest region. Its 2021 figure was $85.034 million.
So a bit smaller than North America, but still substantial.
Right, but the growth projection is pretty strong. By 2033, the forecast is $181.821 million.
$181 million. That's actually closing the gap quite a bit with North America's projected number. Interesting.
Yeah, the growth rate seems a bit faster there, in absolute terms at least.
And within Europe, I imagine the countries like France, Switzerland.
Well, yes, but Germany actually leads. It was the largest single market in Europe in 2021 at $17.177 million.
Hi, Germany. Interesting.
And it's projected to more than double, hitting $38.5 million by 2033.
Okay.
France is next, then the UK. Both pretty sizable, over $10 million in 2021, with strong growth expected.
Right.
But the report also details Italy, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, even Luxembourg, plus a rest of Europe category. So it's quite spread out.
Yeah, that is diverse. It's not just the Alps, clearly. Demand across the continent.
Exactly.
Okay, so North America leads, Europe's number 2 and growing fast. What about the Asia-Pacific region?
Asia-Pacific, or APAC, is the third largest. And like Europe, it's showing some really dynamic growth potential.
Okay, what was the starting point?
It was $60.825 million in 2021.
And the forecast for 2033?
A big jump to $147.504 million.
Wow, okay, so that's growing even faster proportionally than North America or Europe, it sounds like, more than doubling.
It is. Looks like a major growth engine for this market going forward.
And who's driving that in APAC? China.
Absolutely. China's the clear leader there.
Right.
$16.1119 million in 2021.
Right.
Projected to surge to $41.449 million by 2033. That's a huge increase.
Yeah, massive growth. What about other countries?
Japan is also very significant, starting around $12.8 million and projected to reach over $30 million.
Right.
India, too, showing strong growth from $9.3 million up to $25 million.
Okay.
And then you've got South Korea, Australia, Singapore, the Southeast Asia region as a whole,
Front.
Taiwan. They're all contributing and growing.
So a really broad base of growth across APAC led by China, Japan, and India. Definitely a key region to watch.
For sure.
All right, let's cover the other regions. South America, how does that look?
South America is definitely a smaller market overall compared to those top three.
Okay.
Started at $15.433 million in 2021, but it's also projected to grow quite a bit, more than doubling to $34.016 million by 2033.
Still doubling, okay. Any standout countries?
Brazil leads the way there. It was about $6.3 million in 2021, forecast to hit over $14 million. Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile are also mentioned with growth expected.
Got it. And Africa, similar scale.
Very similar scale to South America, actually. It was $16.038 million in 2021.
Okay.
And projected to reach $29.2 million by 2033.
And the main player there?
The report highlights South Africa as the leading market. It accounted for about half the region's total in 2021, around $8 million, and is expected to grow to almost $15 million. Nigeria is mentioned too, and a rest of Africa category.
Okay, so South Africa is key for that region. And finally, the Middle East.
The Middle East is the smallest region covered in the report. Started at $3.631 million in 2021.
Right.
And again, showing strong relative growth, projected to reach $9.633 million by 2033. So nearly tripling, albeit from a small base.
Interesting. And who leads there?
Saudi Arabia is listed as the top market, followed by Turkey and the UAE. Egypt and Qatar also mentioned.
Okay, so even in the smaller regions, the trend is definitely upwards.
Absolutely. Consistent growth seems to be the theme everywhere, just on different scales.
All right, so let's try and pull this all together. What's the big picture takeaway from this cognitive market research report?
Well, the main thing is this steady, solid, global growth. A CAGR of nearly 6% for, ISACs is pretty significant.
Yeah, it shows consistent demand increase. And geographically?
North America is the biggest market right now, dominated by the U.S. But Europe and maybe especially Asia-Pacific are growing really strongly.
Right, with APAC potentially seeing the fastest proportional growth, driven by China, Japan, and India?
Exactly. And then you've got Germany leading in Europe. So key players are the U.S., Germany, China, but with growth happening pretty much across the board.
Okay, so connecting this back to you, our listener, why does dissecting the ISACs market matter?
Well, I think it's a great example of how even these specialized niche markets can actually represent quite a bit of global economic activity.
True. It's not insignificant money we're talking about.
And beyond the economics, seeing where the growth is happening, North America, Europe, but also strongly in Asia-Pacific, South America, Africa, it potentially gives you clues about broader trends.
Like what?
Like maybe changing patterns in outdoor recreation, the rise of adventure tourism in new places, or even, how accessible things like mountaineering or ice climbing are becoming globally.
Right. It's like a little window into how people are interacting with certain environments around the world.
Yeah, a specific piece of gear telling a potentially bigger story about recreation and maybe even environmental access.
Which brings us nicely to a final thought for you to maybe chew on after this.
Mm-hmm.
Given this forecast, this steady growth across so many different regions, from established hubs to developing economies, what might this global expansion in something as specific as the ISACs market suggest about the future of adventure and maybe our collective relationship with the world's colder, icier landscapes?
Yeah, that's a good question to ponder. What does it signal about where we're heading?
Something to think about. We'll leave it there for this deep dive. Okay, let's jump right in. Picture this. You're up high, mountains all around, ice, snow. It's pretty intense. And you've got that one tool, the ice axe. It's essential, right? For safety, for balance, critical gear. But let's zoom out from the climb itself. What about the actual market for these things, these life-saving tools? That's what we're diving into today. We're looking at the ice axe market, and we've got some great analysis here from cognitive market research to guide us.
Yeah, exactly. We're not just reading off numbers. The goal is to understand what's really driving this market. What are the trends? What are the roadblocks? It's kind of the whole ecosystem behind this vital piece of equipment.
Right, the bigger picture. So let's start with that basic overview. What does the research say about the market size and growth?
Okay, so the cognitive market research data shows a market that's, definitely climbing. Back in 2021, they valued the global ice axe market at about $302.61 million.
300 million, okay. And it's growing from there.
Oh, yeah. The projection for 2025 is around $380.6 million. And looking further ahead, say to 2033, they're projecting it could hit $602.06 million,
Wow, okay.
which translates to a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR of 5.9%. That's pretty solid, consistent growth for such a specialized bit of kit.
Yeah, 5.9%, like you said, a sustained ascent.
Yeah.
So what's fueling that? What are the main engines, the key drivers that the research points to?
Well, the biggest one mentioned, really, is the huge expansion of adventure tourism globally. I mean, this isn't just a small niche anymore. The analysis suggests this whole sector might actually top $1.9 trillion by 2032.
Whoa, wait, 1.9 trillion. That's enormous. That scale must ripple down even to something as specific as an ice axe, right?
It absolutely does. Think about it. More people signing up for guided climbs, glacier treks, maybe introductory alpine courses. That directly boosts demand for the essential safety gear. And the ice axe is right up there. The sources suggest it's becoming standard issue for a lot more adventure tourists, not just the hardcore mountaineers.
So basically, more feet on snowy or icy ground, even just for a guided trip, means more need for axes.
That's it. And linked to that is another big driver.
Mm-hmm.
People are just generally more aware of safety now.
Okay.
It's coming from guides, sure, but also from formal courses like avalanche safety, educational programs, even like all the stuff you can find online. YouTube tutorials, things like that.
People are actively learning why they need this stuff, not just that they need it.
Precisely. And the analysis really underlines the ice axe's core function. It's not just for, helping you balance it. It's critical for self-arrest if you fall on snow or ice. It's increasingly seen as just non-negotiable safety gear.
Okay, and I'm thinking about what gets people excited about these adventures in the first place. Does media play a part here? Like movies or social media?
Oh, a significant part.
Yeah.
The research definitely calls that out. You've got these big popular climbing documentaries, say like 14 Peaks, for example, or just the sheer amount of content on social media. Influencers summiting Kilimanjaro, which feels achievable to many, or even dramatic movies about survival in the mountains.
Right, that kind of stuff makes these places look incredible, maybe even accessible.
Exactly. And that inspiration is key. It's pulling in new groups of people. Maybe not folks aiming for K2, but casual hikers wanting to try a glaciated peak, weekend warriors, or just people who see these amazing photos and think, I want to go there, and they realize they need the right gear to do it safely.
So it widens the pool of potential customers way beyond just the elite climbers.
Absolutely. But it's not all growth and sunshine. The market does face some real challenges, some restraints.
Okay, what are the main things kind of pushing back against that growth?
Well, a really significant one is just the cost. Mountaineering is, let's face it, an expensive hobby to get into.
Yeah, you need way more than just the axe, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. You're talking technical shell jackets, pants, those specific stiff boots, crampons, ropes, harnesses. I mean, the list goes on, and it adds up fast. So for someone new, that initial gear cost can be a real barrier. It can definitely slow down how quickly new people get involved.
That makes total sense. The upfront investment is pretty daunting for a beginner.
It really is. And another thing is, this market is inherently niche, right? And it's seasonal.
Yeah, it's not like buying running shoes you use year-round.
Exactly. An ice axe is for very specific conditions. So demand naturally spikes before the main climbing seasons, usually winter. That seasonality makes things tricky for manufacturers and shops. It means inconsistent revenue through the year, which is harder to manage than, say, a market with steady demand.
Okay, niche and seasonal. And then there's the really big one looming over anything related to snow and ice, climate change.
Yeah, this is where the research points to a really serious long-term concern. It's about the actual places where these tools are used. The analysis talks about the effects we're already seeing. Glaciers shrinking, winters getting shorter, less predictable, ice conditions becoming more erratic.
The playground itself is changing.
Yeah.
Dramatically.
It really is. And the source includes this one statistic that kind of brings it home, even though it's about winter sports more broadly. It says by 2050, out of the 21 cities that have hosted the Winter Olympics, only about 10 are expected to still have a suitable climate for those kinds of events.
Wow. Only 10 out of 21 by 2050. That's stark.
It is stark. And while it's broader than just climbing, it really highlights the scale of change impacting these cold environments. These are the environments where ice axes are essential. It raises huge questions about the future of climbing in many traditional zones.
That's a sobering thought for sure. Puts that challenge in perspective. But, okay, despite these headwinds, innovation is still happening, right? What trends are shaping the actual gear?
Oh, absolutely. Innovation is constant.
Hmm.
A huge trend is the ongoing push for lighter materials. Climbers always want lighter gear, especially for tough ascents. Lighter means faster, less fatigue, without compromising on strength, hopefully.
So we're seeing more advanced materials being used?
Definitely. Things like carbon fiber for the shafts, high-tech aluminum alloys for the heads. It's not just about shaving off grams for the sake of it.
Yeah.
It genuinely helps reduce how tired you get, makes you more efficient. That's really important at altitude or over long days.
Yeah, I can see how lighter gear would make a real difference in performance and maybe even safety on a demanding climb.
It really can. And another interesting trend is this move towards modularity, customizable tools.
Modular ice axes, how does that work?
Well, it's about making them more versatile.
Yeah.
So imagine an axe where you can easily swap out the pick, or change the adze for a hammer, or vice versa. This lets the climber basically configure one main axe body for different conditions. Maybe they need something aggressive for steep ice one day, then something different for mixed rock and snow, or just for glacier travel.
Ah, so one tool can kind of adapt to the specific climb you're doing.
Exactly. That adaptability is a big plus, particularly for experienced climbers who encounter a lot of different types of terrain. They can fine-tune their gear without needing, 5 different specialized axes.
Okay, interesting. And then there's a trend that sounds a bit weird for an outdoor tool. Indoor training. How does that fit in?
Right. It seems counterintuitive, but it's actually a really significant factor the research highlights. It's the growth of indoor climbing gyms, and specifically something called dry tooling. The source mentioned there were over 600 indoor gyms in the U.S. alone back in 2022, and a lot of them are now building special walls just for dry tooling.
Wait, so you can actually practice using ice axes and crampons inside all year round?
Yeah. Dry tooling is basically using your ice tools and crampons on artificial climbing walls. They have special holes designed to take the metal points. It's great for practicing technique and building strength, but it also directly affects the market. It means people are buying and using technical ice axes even when there's no ice outside. It broadens the user base beyond just people living near mountains.
Huh. So it creates a sort of year-round training opportunity and maybe even demand for certain types of axes, regardless of the season or location.
That's a big part of it. It's a shift. Something that wasn't nearly as common, say, 10 or 15 years ago.
Hmm.
It definitely helps drive sales and keeps the gear relevant outside the traditional climbing windows.
Okay, so if we pull all these different threads together, what's the main takeaway for you, the listener?
I think it shows that even for something that seems as simple and specialized as an ice axe, the market is actually, really complex and dynamic. It's being shaped not just by climbing trends, but by these huge global forces, adventure tourism booming, safety culture changing, the power of media, and maybe most profoundly, the impact of climate change.
Yeah, understanding this market isn't just about gear specs. It's about technology, sure, but also economics, climate science, even culture, how we approach adventure and risk today, both out in the wild and increasingly in these training environments.
It's a fascinating example of how interconnected things are, even down to one specific tool.
So this deep dive really shows the ice axe market as well. It's growing, it's changing, it's innovating, but it's also facing some really fundamental questions, especially about the future of the places where these tools are actually meant to be used.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a final thought, something that kind of sticks with you from looking at these sources. With climate change undeniably altering those traditional climbing environments, how does that pressure eventually intersect with these trends we've seen in innovation, and especially the rise of indoor training and dry tooling? Will those indoor spaces become even more critical, not just for practice, but maybe as essential alternatives as the actual opportunities to use ice axes in their classic alpine settings continue to shift or shrink? It's something to think about.